This is going to be a pretty comprehensive video about Starfield. Let me just cut to the chase. It's the best single-player video game I've ever played. I adore it. It is one of my favorites ever. Here's how the video is going to be broken up. I'll give you a quick review, what I liked, what I didn't like, problems. Then I'm going to give you a caveat to my review and to my score. I will give you a score. I like the scores. Then I'll tell you if I think you should buy an Xbox for this game. Obviously, I love the game. The question becomes, will you love it? Well, listen to this caveat. You tell me. And then finally, we'll get into some deep dive spoiler sections about the game. But Starfield, I've been playing it since it dropped on early access. I'm probably at about 40 hours in right now, and if I can't give you a review based on that, I've gone through the main game once to get New Game Plus, then I did another full game with New Game Plus. If that ain't enough, I don't know what to tell you, but here we go. I'll tell you the trickiest part about this game right now is there's still so much more I want to do. There's so much time I want to spend in this world, but I want to play other games too. I want to play Baldur's Gate. Spider-Man 2 is looking really good visually. So I don't know how much more time, at least right now, I'm going to spend with it, but I have a real desire to just get lost in the side quests, exploring, seeing what other kind of little Easter eggs and secret story narrative elements they've dropped in, which you know they have. And so I will be revisiting it, I think, often. That said, here we go. Oh, and I also on this video, this will all be in the time code, by the way. So you have to watch the whole thing if you don't want to. I'll also in this video be responding to someone who gave me some crap about a tweet I sent to Bethesda and the Starfield game and Phil Spencer. So that'll be in the time code too. I guess I'll call it My Soul Was Touched, and you'll know it when you see it. All right, let's talk about the game. Let me tell you what I love. Now let's be clear. I will get to this criticism people have about the game in terms of the it doesn't get good until 20 hours in. I did not find that at all, and I'll talk about that. But what I will tell you about why the main quest line, and I did about 90% of the main quest line as my focus, and every 10 to 15% I'd let myself meander, take a side mission, explore a little bit, because I was compelled to, because what was being offered to me as a reward or as a narrative piece, I was like, okay, I want to see what that's about. And I hear the side quests are standout and spectacular, so I'm looking forward to doing a lot of them. But I went through the main quest because I had read some of the early reviews and the press was kind of saying, you probably want to do the main quest first. And I totally get it, because the game is so open and free from almost the get-go that if you don't have any sense of what a good introductory paragraph... What? If you don't have any sense of what a good introductory pathway is, what's happening in the brain, Jaffe? I don't know. Shh, listen, let's focus. You could get easily distracted in this game, and then 5 hours pass, and you're like, this is boring. All I'm doing is wandering around planets and scanning shit and collecting shit. Why? I'll go play No Man's Sky, where I actually have a seamless transition from planet to sky. Do not let anybody tell you this game is No Man's Sky. There are elements of it, absolutely, but that's not what's going on. So I did play the main quest primarily as my focus on the first try. And I say all this to explain that it was so well written. Okay, it most games, and if I were teaching a design class, I would advise this in the vast majority of cases. You design, and I'm not very good at this. I was always better at idea and story first. But the best way to design a game for most developers is at an abstract level of mechanics first, and then you find a story you can write around that. The problem with that is when you have a game that presents itself as an adventure and you don't have the resources to actually craft an adventure, because an adventure movie story is like trapezes coming to you. You deal with this, and then something happens, and then this happens, and you think you've got the quest solved, and then, oh my God, it twists here. And it's constantly swinging a new trapeze to you to keep you interested and engaged. Video games, even though they're wrapped like adventures, more often than not, they have like 15 little modular play pieces, and that's all the team can do. And sometimes the game's more than good enough at a mechanical level to sustain that. But most times you get stuff like these open world fetch quests where it's like, oh no, it's the Daredevil video game. And yes, the stories are great in the cutscene. And now we need you to go get the 6 weird bombs that are giving off only somebody that has great sonar power, and it's just like, and then an hour later, it's like, instead of bombs, now we'll make them criminals. And here's a little twist. Now the criminals are moving. So the sonar pings are moving, and it very quickly feels like the wrapper of the story is just kind of there, but the real meat of it is the moment-to-moment gameplay, which is, after a while, it can't sustain a 20-hour game. That's what I feel most of these games. This game feels like it was written first, and then it was designed around the script. Now, I don't think that's absolutely what happened, but I think, I could be wrong, but it seems very clear to me, this is a game that had the resources to make gameplay choices around the high-level desire to make the player experience a compelling story, whatever that would mean. And so what came first, the design that wanted the player to have that sense, or the actual story? And then the designer came on and said, okay, the lead writer and lead designer, same guy, but which probably helps, came on and said, okay, now let's create gameplay, and we have enough resources that we can just keep it varied. I don't fucking know. But it reminds me a lot. God of War 2005, obviously a much smaller game than this, but I've told the story before, but it never leaves too far from my brain. We win the best game of the year at DICE. I go pee in the bathroom. Coming up next to me is the late, great video game executive, Kelly Flock. He steps up to the urinal next to me and he says, hey, congrats. I say, thanks, Kelly. He says, yeah, it's amazing what kind of game you can make when you have, unlimited resources and time. And he was taking the piss, but, I got literally, but I got what his point was valid, which is like, it's like, when the money truck keeps backing up ducats, of course, I think that's clearly what is happening in Starfield, in the sense that, I'm not saying Bethesda hasn't done this before, but they clearly had enough time and enough resources to really deliver. And I'm not saying they didn't cut things. I'm sure they did, but what they shipped is a vision of interesting scenarios, interesting missions, side missions, characters, things to discover, things to explore. It really does feel like a rich universe of possibility. And obviously some of it's on rails and some of it's not, but you can't quite tell what is and what isn't unless you really start taking it apart. That is a wonderful way to see resources spent. So I get it. The game can be pretty fucking ugly at parts. It can. It's beautiful at parts, absolutely stunning and inspiring in certain vistas. And then you see the character close-ups, the characters that are NPCs that are not sort of main star NPCs, and it's a joke. It's disturbingly ugly. I'm sure you've seen the screen grabs, but the resources spent on making the gameplay tie into the writing, great. What a great fucking game. Feels like you're living in the world. I haven't had a feeling about a game like this since Deus Ex 1 and Half-Life. That's the kind of game this is. So if you're into those, you're going to lose your poo-poo pee-pee over this. Well, come on, you're 52, Jaffe. You're not talking to kindergarten. My brain speaks to many. Speaking of Deus Ex, I remember in that game, there was one moment where it's like it's been so long, but it's like you can kill this person or not kill this person. And it spun the story in a totally different direction. I'm sure there was a lot of reuse, but it really felt real. This game has about 3 to 6 of these choices that I found myself, because the writing was good, and so I really was vibing with the characters, but also just because it was clear these choices would matter. I found myself really putting the controller down at times and going, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know where I fall on this conundrum. There's a big one that happens, which if you've played it, let me just kind of give you some hint without spoiling anything. You just have to make a really big decision. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know. And I made the decision I made, and I kept playing, and it was, well, I'm not going to over dramatize here, but it was like, oh, fuck, I hated the result of that decision, but I loved part of it. So some really good choices in this game. And by the way, I just want to speak to that trapeze idea, the constant engagement. It does not let up. The very end of the game, the last part of the last act is still throwing fresh ideas at you, both mechanically and narratively. And you're like, Jesus fucking Christ. It's like they fucking care. Like they really want to tell you a great adventure story that you're the star of. It's just wonderful. And I'm going to go into specifics in the spoilers, but It really does work beautifully. It's a wonderful game. I will say that I would love to have played this with the DualSense. The best thing about the PS5 for me is the controller. Is it the DualSense, the DualShock, whatever this thing is? It not only does it feel good, but the gyro in this game, you have to pick up things like with a mouse ideally, but you're using your sticks. It would be great to have the gyro. It would be great to have the gyro aiming for sniping. I never really thought it would work, and then I played it in Days Gone with this controller, and it's like, oh, it's wonderful. And then, of course, the haptics. So once you've gotten used to that on the PS5, it really is noticeably absent. I have heard that a bunch of the mods that are being done on the PC side will be coming to the Xbox console, which is where I played this game. So hopefully we'll get that down the road. A lot of people are complaining. Let's get to some of the negatives. People say, well, it's buggy, it's Bethesda, or the load screens, or this, that. I just want to speak to that real quick. Like I said, if I had not done the main story first, and that had been my primary focus, there's of every likelihood I would play this and I would have played it for 3 or 4 hours and I would say, it's not for me, it's boring. And I would be none the wiser. Okay. So it's not that it takes 12 to 15 hours to get going, but it can. Somebody wrote me, this is Jay the Gamer on my YouTube channel. He says, Jaffe thinks almost every game is boring and has a slow start, but thinks this game isn't boring. When the biggest criticism of this game is that it's boring and has a slow start. I'm so confused. And what I said to him was, the very nature of why I love this game is the answer to his question, which is to say, you can play it however you want. And I had a little bit of help from the reviews in terms of what I thought I would like, and they were right, and it was delightful. But it can go south very quickly. And, I wonder how much of that is a problem at a design level. And, I think if you remember even Elden Ring had a tutorial, but a lot of people were missing it. So in one of their updates, they did a patch that kind of made it a little more clear where it was. I don't think they should limit your freedom in this game, but I do think maybe it would have been wise to somehow go, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. Not a problem, pal. But there's some guardrails up that are suggestive of what you could be doing if you're starting to maybe go off the path too soon. And I didn't need it, but I did need it because I had it from the press. But if you just pick it up and you don't, I could see a lot of people washing out of this game going, what the fuck is this? Is dull as dishwater, man. But that's not what happened to me. That was not my experience. My experience going through the main story was it reminded me of Resident Evil 4. And I think that might be the only other game I've finished so far this year, maybe a couple others. But that game, RE4 remake, and this one, they feel like they're designed because they want you to finish. They want you to see the ending. They want you to have a great, satisfying adventure. And so it's not that hard of a game. I mean, obviously your mileage will vary based on what you spec out and this, that, and the other, but it's not like you've got these boss fights or these spaceship fights that are like, dude, I was on that for 8 hours. It's very much like it wants you to have a good time. It feels very much like a host of a party going, hey, let us show you this cool stuff. And so I think the people who stick with it, and once they get on the main quest line, I would imagine there's going to be a high completion rate for that quest. I don't know how we'll get that data. I'm sure, Bethesda has it. But I loved that about this game. And I'm not saying there aren't difficult areas of the game, but I have found the game got more difficult the further I get off the main quest. So maybe that's kind of the promise to core gamers. It's like, it does get challenging, but it's not that. It's like on a difficulty scale, it's like a 6 out of 10, with 10 being like, Bloodborne. Maybe it's a 5 out of 10. For example, I barely did any of the upgrades. I upgraded my character, but I wasn't gathering resources for my weapons and spacesuits and spaceships and all that I was aware of. And I knew what was happening in that part of the design, but I ignored 90% of it. And I was happy to. I didn't want to craft anything. I didn't want to have to leave the main path so I could go collect resources all over the universe just so I could upgrade my rifle. I'm like, fuck you. And I didn't have to do it, which was great. Helped a lot with the pacing. People complain about the loading. Immersion breaking is the loading thing. They go, it needs to be like No Man's Sky where you take off and it's seamless. The game feels very immersive, more immersive than 95% of the games I've played, maybe more. But if your definition of immersion requires the world to never show you a HUD or never show you a load screen or never, do anything where it's clear, you're playing a game. Yeah, this isn't for you. But it's a good decision, though. There's a guy on NeoGAF. Let me see if I can bring this up real quick. He says, because a lot of people were saying, but I want to fly everywhere and all this shit. He says, this is him 666. He says, as someone who played a lot of Elite Dangerous, having to plot a course route and then just spend time manually jumping from system to system, then doing the same docking procedure planet over and over and over, I understand why they went this way. People would be screaming about having their time wasted if they went with something like that. Or if they had both options, most people would just be using the menu system and doing it manually or instantly anyway. And I think that's absolutely right. If you're looking for that kind of game, you can get it in No Man's Sky, you can get it in Elite, but this is not, like I said, this is not a space sim. This is a space adventure / RPG. And in that it delivers beautifully. But sure, it's a valid criticism if that's what you're looking for. I thought the shooting was really good. The AI was really good. The weapons felt good. The navigation felt good. I did find that if you're going to play in first person and first person works great. Interiors, third person does not work that well in interiors. You're getting hung up on the geometry a lot. Exterior wise, when you're outside and you're doing platforming, there's not a lot of it, but if you want to like climb a summit and all this shit with your jetpack, I always went to the far third person. But short of those two things, I found third person and first person interchangeable. That plays really, really well. I thought the space combat was a lot of fun. I mean, I don't think it's as deep as something like Elite. I didn't find myself, or at least haven't so far, spending too much time worried about where my shields are, my weapons are. I just, I took what I got and I moved it around in certain cases during a battle. But for the most part, it was great. And it was fun. It was solid. It was very arcadey. It was very satisfying. It was fun to sort of, pick up all the scrap and junk that the explosions had left. It was fun to knock out certain ships' engines and then board them and kill them or steal their shit. It was awesome. What I also loved about it was that when you get a new ship, it's meaningful. It's not like one of these things where you can upgrade your ship, but it's not like one of these things where, it's incremental and it's like, how I fly now is very different than how I was flying 12 hours ago. It's like, no, I mean, that is most games. It takes a while for you to really appreciate the leveling up. And that applies in this game on character and stuff. But on ships, if you switch ships, it's like switching cars in GTA. It's like going from a solid everyday car to a Ferrari, and you feel it. And I think for me, because it's in space, because I suck at driving, I don't have anything to crash into for the most part. So when I upgraded to a ship and I suddenly was swooping and zooming and, doing all kinds of crazy boost and shit and being able to go around guys and target their engines, those upgrades really felt exciting and really felt good. So the moment-to-moment gameplay, just great. Again, like I said, I wish I was playing it with a DualShock or a DualSense, whatever. They're terrible at naming things. PS Plus, PS Extreme, PS Premium. I don't fuck. DualSense, DualShock, PS. Stop. You guys are some of the most creative people in the video game business, PlayStation. Get somebody better to name your shit. Anyway, Are there bugs? Sure. But it doesn't feel like a super buggy game. I did get crashes, which is weird for a first party title. And I got them frequently enough that I noticed them. Probably in my 40 hours, I got 5 crashes where I had to reset, which was no big deal. The auto saves and quick saves are seamless and quick. And a couple times I got stuck in geometry. But those things, if you really need that pristine experience, I'm not saying it's a bug mess or anything, but it's not perfect. It's not like a PlayStation first party game where you're like I don't think I've ever had a PlayStation first party game crash, except when I was a tester back in the day, but it wasn't PlayStation. It was Sony ImageSoft. So, Dracula Sega CD crash. What do you want from me? But yeah, I didn't have a problem with those sorts of bugs. I did have a couple of gameplay bugs that, like, the mission markers seemed to be a little, 90% of the time, that's a big number, 90% of the time they worked, but every now and then you could tell that the mission markers, it's like, you're supposed to be guiding me to this planet and you keep showing me something else. I'm like, why are you doing, I couldn't quite tell what was going on there. There was one moment where I was storing some stuff on the moon and it was contraband and it was on the moon, but then it wasn't. And maybe I got arrested or something, but not for that. But when I paid my bounty, maybe they took all my contraband, even if the NPCs that I was paying the bounty to weren't aware of it or something. There's some weird things that don't really line up, but I mean, these are all minor. Let me tell you something. The score of this game for me, 40 hours in, playing on the Xbox Series X, best single player game I've ever played. Just delightful. Just a joy. And I want to get into why that is in the second part of this video, because it's important, but it's hard to talk about without spoilers. Just say that the writing, and I don't just mean like, oh, the dialogue's good, although dialogue's great, performances are great, but the scenario writing and the big picture and the questions the game asks and the metaphors of the game and the themes of the game, all of that came together with really good gameplay and tons of content and tons of choices, and I fucking loved it. This is a 9 out of 10 for me. It is easily in my game of the year running, for whatever that's worth to you. Easily top 3, but obviously the other 2 would probably not be narrative-based games, right? So it's more of a mechanics-based game, but as a story-based game, best one I've ever played. Fucking delightful. I loved it. Here's the caveat to that, though, and I think this is really important when it comes to analyzing why this game works, why this game may not work for you. So I'm a kid of the 70s and 80s, okay? I'm a kid who grew up with, I'm a geek kid of the 70s and 80s, right? And I don't just mean Star Wars. A lot of people, this is not a Star Wars game. This is a game if you love Star Trek, if you love Star Trek Next Generation, if you love Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Contact and Interstellar, and being a kid in the 70s and 80s and going into bookstores where there were these incredibly evocative covers for science fiction novels. And it wasn't just like, you know, these days covers of books and fantasy books are all try to be classy and shit. But back then you would have these insane high adventure images of astronauts and space pirates and cool ships. And it was just, you know, it fired your imagination. And there were also these books that were amongst us geeks just coveted. I think they were, one of them at least was called Shipwrecked, but it was this artist and he had a whole suite of these books. There's like 7 of them. And you can't look at the art in the world of Starfield and not know that they were heavily inspired by this art, or it was a hell of a coincidence. And this was the kind of art that you're looking at right now that, I mean, this was the art from those books growing up that just blew our fucking minds, you know? And the game is filled with that. The game is absolutely filled with that sort of visit to those locations, to those kinds of ships, to that sense of space adventure. I was a kid that went to Epcot when it first opened, right? That the future pavilions at Disneyland where you got to, you know, feel like an astronaut and a scientist, and, you know, Space Camp was in my backyard in Alabama. I was a kid who grew up with Atari 2600 games. So boxes like this of this horrible game, this one's Space Caverns. This is some stuff from Image, but they all made you feel like the game inside that box was going to send you on the grandest adventure of all time. And, you know, you're a kid, so you kind of project and fill in the blanks, but obviously it didn't. This is a game that fulfills the promise of this box. As an adult now, I feel like the game I'm playing is the game that this box promised me. And then there are things like, you know, the first time you go into this sort of, let's just say the first time the game reveals its Christopher Nolan influences, you're like, oh shit, that is cool. That is fucking cool when you discover this location and this thing happens. And then there's also Star Trek stuff that is like all these side quests. I found this one, this is not a spoiler, it's just side quest, but I found this one side quest. It was this ship hails me above this planet, and it's these humans that left Earth well before most humans left Earth. And so it was before warp speed and all that shit that humanity discovered. And they're just now arriving at the planet that they were going to reseed humanity because they felt Earth was going to fuck up, which it did. And now, lo and behold, though, they're like, what the fuck? There's people already on this planet. What is going on? And then they're like, hey, can you help us? And suddenly you're in a Next Generation Star Trek episode. And that's a whole fucking side quest, man. There's also, you know, a section where I was like on this planet looking for something called the Scorpion Sting. There was this big structure that was clearly not organic, or it was a sentient thing made this thing. And I'm walking around with a couple of the crew. I had 3 people with me. That's not often. It's usually just one other person. And it felt like I was on the away team of the original Star Trek. It's very cool. I'm getting to a point, though, about what the caveat is. Okay, so let me just say one more thing, which is about the music. The music, you almost wonder if they're not, you know, one musical note away all throughout the soundtrack, which is deliciously, delightfully just brilliant. But are they one note away from a lawsuit? Because, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Todd Howard, who was the director of the game, was talking to the composer and said, you get the love theme from Empire, the da-na-na-na-na-na, that thing, you get the first 2 notes. If you ever go back and look at the opening of all the Star Trek shows, that kind of xylophone ding, 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 that little ping thing, that is in there. But before it gets to the 3rd or 4th note that would get them into a lawsuit, they changed the note, right? Composer Jerry Goldsmith with everything from Explorers, the fucking Joe Dante movie from the 80s, Klingon music. I think Goldsmith did a lot of the Star Trek stuff as well. There's a Klingon attack that sounds like it's totally in this fucking soundtrack. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's even some Superman, the bum 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 bum. That thing, that is totally cribbed but adjusted so they don't get sued. I'm assuming. I don't know how intentional it was, but the reason I bring all this up is that a lot of the heavy lifting of this game is done by a zeitgeist that has been romanticized and delivered brilliantly to so many people, at least the first time, kids of the 70s and 80s, with all these references I'm giving you. And I don't know what it's like to not have, you know, if you're a kid who was born in, 2005 and you play this, I don't know if you have a more cynical view of space or if you think about space at all. But where we were with space as a real people and where we were with space as a zeitgeisty place in entertainment during those times was so inspiring and exciting. And I think for a lot of kids that are now adults, it remains as such. And so it would be wrong to assume that this game gets there on its own. To use a very layperson and probably bad space analogy, all of this 70s, 80s influence, intentional or not, are like the rocket boosters that get the rocket up into orbit and then they kind of fall apart, which is, and then you just have the capsule or whatever. It's not to say that Starfield on its own doesn't do amazing stuff, and I'll talk about that, but it gets into orbit for sure because of this kind of love letter to that era and how it captures it so wonderfully. And in the spoiler section, which is coming up, I will tell you about a specific section that really just was an emotional joy to experience related to this. But yeah, so it's a 9 out of 10 for me. I don't know if it's going to hit you like that. If you stripped away all of that stuff and you were just talking about the game, I'd say it's like a 7 out of 10. And like, if but that's like saying if you make God of War, but it's not Kratos, he's no longer violent and it's not bloody. The combat's the same. The story's totally different. There's still a lot to love about Starfield, but I can't extract the stuff that sort of burned into my cultural DNA from just the core mechanics, at least not with how much I've played so far. So that's an important caveat. I saw Stephanie Sterling gave it a 4 out of 10. I don't know how much that's grandstanding on their part, or if that's what they really felt. They're younger than me, not that much younger than me. So, I don't fucking know what you're going to think about the game, but it's my review. So, I care, I'm curious, but it's a 9 out of 10 for me. Absolutely loved it. I hope you feel the same. Let's dive into some spoilers. Yes, I changed my shirt. It was hot. And then I changed it, and the dog got excited, and he jumped up on me, and we played. And now I'm recording again, so there's been a time passed. For me, time passed. But for you, because it's edited, it didn't. It's so weird how that weird things are happening. Should you buy an Xbox to play this game? Well, you don't have to. If you have a PC, you can play it. You can get it on Steam or the Microsoft Store. You can get Game Pass and stream it to your PC, to your tablet, to your phone. I wouldn't recommend that. It's too small. If you have a Samsung that has the Xbox connection thing, you can do that. So, but what I would say is, if you are a kid of the 70s and 80s and you love space and all the stuff that I've said in this review connects with you, or some of it does in a meaningful way, yeah, you should play the game. I don't care if you're a Sony pony. Oh, God, help me. Help me, Spider-Woman.
Help me, Spider-Woman.
You should play it if you check those boxes, because it's just a great game. It's a great game that captures a wonderful mood and tone, and it's a really cool story. So there's my answer. Yes, you should play it. If you have had an eye on an Xbox, get it. But if you can play it another way, you don't want to spend that much money, there are options for you, which is wonderful. But you should play it if it sounds like your kind of game. Because if it sounds like your kind of game, because it sounded like my kind of game when they were talking about it, and they delivered on what they were talking about. So give it a play. Okay, spoilers. This is in no particular order. I'm just going to jump all over the place. I'm drinking pink lemonade. It's good. God, it's good. I don't know why it's... Spider-Woman. Start with the narrative a little bit. One of the just geekiest things that Okay. First off, there's a theme here. I got to talk to the writer of this. I hope I can get an interview with this guy. There's a theme here, I think. I mean, obviously, who knows what was intended or not, but there's thematics and subtext in this game. I think at a fundamental level, it's kind of about destroying in order to create, right? In order to get off of the earth, we had to basically... in the story, create and utilize technology that we found that we didn't know would end up causing Earth to be mostly uninhabitable, but that's what it did. You have a character who pretty much has to destroy her life, her relationships, not her memories, but, when she, quote, wins the game, if you go into the Unity, which is the goal, her payment is all this great adventure and exploration, just like getting off Earth, but it comes at the expense of tearing down and destroying so much that you have to leave behind. And we don't know what happens to those people. They're just gone. I was a little confused because it sounded like she was going to be going through, my character's a she, it was Taylor Swift, of course. It sounded like, shake it off. It sounded like she was going to be taking some of the other Constellation members through the Unity, but I don't know. Maybe they went, but they weren't visually represented. I have no idea. But it's interesting that at a grand level, when you look at it like cosmically with the planets and the universe and how we only could get the ability to go out and explore by destroying our home. I mean, there's something rich there. I like that. I like that idea of there's almost a allegory for growing up and childhood. It's like you have this safe home base and it's lovely and wonderful, but you have to leave it if you want to go and explore and reach your potential. And it happens metaphorically, it happens literally to the main character, it happens to our planet. Is that intentional? I don't know. But it doesn't seem like it's that far-fetched. Another one that I just thought was the coolest thing, and I was happy to kind of see this verified in the game. So if you press the button and it shows you your character, and you can, tweak the character, weapons, all this shit, your ship, then you can go up and check your missions, and you pull out again from that to see the planet you're on. You can figure out where you want to go and rotate around and, travel fast travel to certain areas. Then you press the button again, and it pulls out to the solar system you're in. And then you press the button again, and it pulls out to the universe that you're in, right? So it's, fairly standard. It's, But If you press the button again, it pulls out from the universe and it goes back to you. And I just thought this was weird at first because you have this kind of dun, 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 and then there's a jump cut and you go back. And halfway through the game, I started wondering, is this intentional, right? Part of it is maybe it's intentional at a quality of life user interface issue. But at the same time, metaphorically speaking, subtextually speaking, it's subtextual. I don't think it's a metaphor. Well, I don't know what it is. Depends what. Well, here's what I'm saying. You tell me what it is. But there's meat on that there bone, my friends, because as I'm playing through it, the first half of the game, I'm like, that's weird. And then I'm like, maybe it's because the game is hinting towards the more we pull back and the more we see everything, the more we arrive back at who we are, because we are, in essence, everything. We're all connected. It's all the same. It's all the same building material. We are one consciousness, basically. And I'm like, it felt like that. And at the end of the game, you see yourself, and she's kind of like, almost like the Watcher from Marvel Comics, but she's you. And she stands at the crossroads of the multiverse of all the places that, you know, you could go. And she's seen them all before and blah, blah, blah. And she says to you, she says, I am as much you as you are a part of everything. All points connect to here. When a star is born or dies, its existence beats through the heart of this place, the unity. And so, again, I'm not saying that makes the game like you have to agree with me, but when I am playing it, it makes the game feel more, it's richer, and it leaves you with things to think about. A lot of the press on this game, they were like, we're going to tackle big questions, you know, and they weren't specific, but it sounded like, you know, they were getting into religion, which they do. And why are we here? And is there a God, and this and that and the other? And I was like, please don't let that just be bullshit lip service. And lo and behold, not only did they do it, but most fiction that tries to tackle this stuff is relatively unsatisfying. Like, they don't go for it at the end. Like, if there's one of my favorite books of all time is a 2001 Clark book, I think it's called Children of Man or something, but it's about our first contact with aliens and how we evolve, and the children of Earth evolve to become the next phase of existence. And then it just kind of leaves you hanging. Like, it doesn't really explain what that means. Or the movie Contact, which I love. At the end, it's like, yeah, Jodie Foster meets the aliens, sort of, kind of, maybe. We don't really know. And it's like, well, this is how it's always worked. It has to be slow. So it's almost like they don't really want to commit. I love that this game commits. It's not like the answers they came up with are staggeringly original or profound, although some of them hang in that world. But I like that they actually went for it and delivered on the promise of, no, that's what this story is about. And they actually went there and you know, crossed the finish line with it. So I loved it. Another thing I was very surprised by was the ending. I don't want to say I got emotional, like, oh, I cried. No, fuck you. No. There was a little memorial scene, at least on my timeline. Maybe everybody got this with Barrett gave a speech about one of the characters who had died. And, you know, it's a good speech. It was well written. It was well performed. But, you know, it was still a little melodramatic. It was, but it's the best I've seen that kind of thing done in a game. The nicest part of it, though, is the character who died. Here's the spoiler, at least in my timeline, was this guy, Jacob Coe. And earlier in the game, you had done this mission with this guy, and you had to go to his childhood home, and it's clear he had an incredibly tumultuous relationship with his dad, who's still alive. And you deal with his dad, and he deals with his dad, and you get out of there, and it's like, oh, man, that guy's a nightmare. The fact that they brought Jacob's dad from way earlier in the game to the memorial of his son. It was what a nice little detail. And you can go up to him and he has these regrets, and it's like you wouldn't think that would happen. It was a really nice bit of writing and a nice little surprise. But the thing that was the most emotional about it at a personal level was, I told somebody on my stream the other day, it felt like the end of a great TV series, not the end of a season, but like when you know this is the last time, you know, barring any kind of stupid, cheesy reunion show, that you'll be with these characters. And that's what it felt like at the end. Before you go into the Unity, you have an option to go back to the lodge and say goodbye to your friends. And some of them say they're going to go with you, although you don't see that happen. And everybody's like, will you remember me? Will you be the same when you respawn? And it's almost like Doctor Who, right? When you regenerate. And it was just, it wasn't emotional. Like I said, it wasn't sad, but it was touching. There was a sadness about the fact that it's like, oh, I'm going to miss Barrett and Sarah and, the little girl who's the daughter of Jacob, the dad who died, and all that. It was very interesting. I'd never really felt that in a game before, and I think that speaks to just the really good writing and performing of these characters. I actually found myself. The lodge, you can walk around the lodge, and I went down into the room of the little girl who had lost her father, and I really felt for her. And I said, I don't want to forget her. And I didn't know what was going to happen when I went through the Unity or into the Unity or whatever. So I'm like, I'm going to take a couple of these stuffed animals in her room just so I can remember her by and have them, like, when I set up, I'm going to buy a home in the next version of the game. I'm going to save the money up and buy a home in New Atlantis or wherever. And I want to have those of, memories of my first, or memorabilia, souvenirs of my first experience. And they didn't travel with me. But I mean, that's how much I connected with these characters. There was a tiny bit. I'm not trying to overblow this fucking thing. But I remember when Avatar, the first one, first came out, and there was all these, they felt very stupid and media driven, but it's like, people are dealing with depression. The world of Avatar is so real that when the movie's over, they're sad because they don't want to leave Pandora. What? Shut up, you idiot. But I will say, though, that there was a little bit of that kind of feeling as I was saying goodbye and going into the Unity. It was a sense of like, I'm going to miss this. I'm going to miss this experience. I'm going to miss these characters. I don't know how you could ask for anything more in a story-based narrative video game. And then when you go through the into the Unity, man, and I don't know, because I've finished the game twice now, and it's the same thing in terms of my actions on Earth yielded the same thing, but it was so cool that in this kind of starscape, you can look around, and this woman yourself, this kind of watcher of you, is sort of almost like bringing up, this is what will happen in the universe now that you're leaving it. And it's like, your friends will go on, they'll do this, that, and the other. And because of you, a whole new group will rise up that will try to help humanity, blah, blah, blah. And again, I don't know if that's everybody's ending or you really can play the game differently. And there are like 20 of those. I have no clue. But I thought that was very, that was executed wonderfully. It worked really, really well. It was kind of like a semi-interactive version of a movie, like at the end when they have titles and it's like, here's what happened to Henry Hill at the end of Goodfellas or whatever. It was cool. I loved it. Let's talk about New Game Plus. The idea at a narrative level is awesome. I don't know if it works as great, at least first time through New Game Plus. Now, I never do New Game Pluses. I finish a game, I'm done. Maybe I'll go back from time to time, or maybe like when I finished Resident Evil and I opened up New Game Plus this year, the remake, I'm like, I want to try these costumes I got. And I tried it for about 10 minutes. I'm like, all right, I get it. I'm done. But New Game Plus in Starfield is almost a misnomer, I think, because the story, it's more like a massively long full game post-credit sequence, really, because the story just picks up. And the coolest part about it is it's not like every time you hit New Game Plus, your character wakes up from a dream and it's the same thing. The narrative of you are now this Starborn and you have become and evolved into something else, but you're still you, and you go into a new universe where there are dialogue and there are character interactions where you're like, hey, I used to be friends with you. And they're like, what are you talking about? And there are characters that remember. I've only encountered one or two. I think I've encountered two so far in the first New Game Plus, where they knew what was going on, which was very sort of Star Trek Next Generation Guinan. How they know that's pretty cool, And then there's also, I think there's some shifts in the art. I could be looking into it too deeply, but I want to say there were a couple of changes to the environment as well when I went into this new universe. So there's so much about it at a narrative and experiential level that I loved. What I found a little troubling is it's kind of contrast to good game design. And I found myself in the New Game Plus getting bored. So I was so compelled and so interested to figure out what's going to happen if I go through the Unity again. Will they remember me a little bit more, a little bit less? Will I see different things in the cosmos as I'm fading away about how I affected the world? And so it was so easy to go back and collect the various pieces you need to reassemble the thing that gets you into the Unity, that the minute I came back, even though I was like, oh, I want to do some side quests, I'm like, nope, I want to, because by the very nature of saying the story isn't really New Game Plus, it's a continuation of that first actual story, you feel like you need to finish it if you want to get the whole story. But in that, the gameplay is pretty much the same. And so it was the first time ever playing the game where I was like, I had to kind of soldier through, which I didn't mind doing because the story was compelling enough and how they were telling it was compelling enough. But I do think that was a, I don't know how they would have solved it. And I don't know if everybody agrees it's a problem, but I could see hitting that wall at a design level and going, oh fuck, how do we solve this? Because we can't make a brand new game. The whole point, you got to reuse that shit. So I don't know, but I love so much about it at a narrative level that I'm cool. And when I did finish it the second time, I was like, okay, not a lot has changed and they haven't dropped any real new breadcrumbs. So fuck it. I'm going to go New Game Plus number 2. And this time I'm just going to do it to role play and side quest and explore and not actually even pay attention to the main mission. Unless I discover something in the world that gives me a reason to. So thoughts on that. It's also, again, this is a good game, a good story, a good piece of art and or entertainment will do this. It gives you things to think about. The New Game Plus brings up, again, don't know if it's intentional, but it brings up some interesting things that reminded me of that whole, was it Frontiers with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence, where he wakes her up because he thinks she's beautiful. And then he's like, oh, fuck, what have I done? It's like moral dilemmas, right? So it's the first game I was playing through, I really wanted to figure out if I could hook up with the character, Sarah, who runs Constellations. And I got kind of close. I couldn't quite figure out, some people have said, oh, I got married to her and all this. I must have done the wrong thing. I don't fucking know. So I go through the Unity and I'm like, okay, now I have, it's almost like you're cheating. And I'm not saying I was like, oh, I won't do it. I'm morally, in real life, I would be morally opposed to it, but it's like, you've got this playbook now. It's like Biff going into the future and seeing the sports almanac. It's like, I know what she likes and doesn't like and what she responds to. And you're like, this feels kind of creepy now. Now I'm romancing her, but I'm kind of doing it at this very calculated level. So that was an interesting feeling to have, which I wasn't expecting. The other thing was, it was interesting that after, 2 hours of New Game Plus, I was like, fuck her. Or New Game Plus 2. I was like, I don't care. I mean, it was really interesting. I'm like, I'm done role playing in order to get her to do something for me. If she wants to hook up with me, great. But I'm not going to be a character for her. And I know that's like, Jesus, Jaffe, you're kind of looking deep into this. But life is like that. I mean, it's interesting. It's like, when you have those epiphanies, when you're with someone or you're trying to be with someone, and it's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? I don't want to change. What would be the point, right? And in that, the New Game Plus experience, you actually literally through interactivity have that experience of going, wait, what am I doing? Versus just seeing it in a cutscene. So I thought it was very, very cool. Very, very cool. Okay, before I finish up and tell you about this tweet I said where the game touched my soul, I want to tell you the stuff that I didn't quite like. I love that your companions will jump into the fray and fight with you and fight for you. I love that they're actually effective. It's not just cosmetic. They will kill enemies. I wish they would have put up a little bit of guardrail around that, though, because a couple of times there was like a boss character or a bounty character, and I'm like, even the final boss, whatever. Well, it's the final, whatever his name was. I went against the hunter, right? So I've died a few times fighting him and his buddy. And then I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to go into this back area and I'm going to change weapons. And he's dead because my companions off screen just killed him. Because I had whittled him down enough. And it's like, I do wish that in those cases, they would be like, okay, we're gonna save the last couple of shots for the player. Otherwise, it's gonna be like, what the fuck just happened? So that was kind of annoying. It's nitpick, but it's annoying. Not entirely clear how you get in trouble for things. I know if you see something that's red, it'll be you're stealing it, but you can do it out of view. And if you do it out of view, no one calls you on it. But I think sometimes you still get in trouble for stealing things, even though no one saw it. Like your bounty will go up, or when you do pay your bounty, they'll take away that stolen item that no one saw you steal. There's a little bit, there's a lot about the game that it doesn't explain it. And I actually like, what I'm going to do? I don't lie to you people. I'm getting tired. It's a long day. It's a long review. I have more things to say on this. Not a lot more, but I'll do a follow-up video in the next, I want to get back to normal streaming. I'll do a follow-up video in the next week or so about this with the stuff that we didn't talk about. But so let me just jump right to this. There was a guy on my Twitter named Citizen Chad. He says, I laughed when Jaffe said it touched my soul. Like, bro, that statement means that your life is complete. It is literally all downhill from here. What? I don't know what he means. But anyway, he said Starfield is the catalyst for that. Starfield, right? Whatever. But I did want to mention that because I don't like hyperbole at all. I certainly don't like it in reviews and stuff. So I wanted to be clear about what I was talking about because I don't want to be all flowery. Look, it's so... I hate when people do that. It's such horseshit. Or maybe it's not. They just can't articulate it. So they just go to this very broad stroke explanation, which doesn't really land with anybody except the person who's actually experienced what they're talking about. But what I was talking about was the stuff that was related to earlier in the video, talking about being a kid of the 70s and 80s and kind of reconnecting with that. And specifically the section in the game where you go to NASA, abandoned NASA on Earth. I assume it's somewhere in Florida, Cape Canaveral maybe. I don't know where it was. And first off, that's just crazy. I'm going to NASA. It's abandoned, but there's this giant ship that was clearly going to launch. They never could get it off the ground. This is fucking NASA where, I'd taken tours there before, right? And it's all rubbled and destroyed, but if you can get down into the rubble, into the basement area, there is a museum that is still mostly intact. And the museum has the moon lander and the Mars lander, the Mars rover, and it's got the space shuttle, and it's got the Apollo first astronaut suit, and it's got the actual capsule that these are all models, of course, but in the narrative, it's the actual capsule that Neil Armstrong touched down on the moon in '69, and other stuff that's fantasy about into the future that hasn't happened yet. But that's what touched my soul, I think, is what I mean. That is along with that music that was very 80s and very 70s, that sense of putting myself in that timeline and going, I not only have been to this museum or museums like it that have these things, but I was alive for a lot of this stuff. And I'm looking at a museum of my past and present in a story that is set, I don't remember what it is, 1,200 years or however 500 years, whatever it is in the future. And it was just such an amazing moment because I had grown up with my dad and my brother loving talking about space, looking at the stars, talking about speculating what is out there. He would wake us up. My dad would wake us up early to watch the space shuttle launches and landings. Me and my brother were huge fans and are huge fans of Star Trek and all the speculative fiction and stuff. And so I feel like, as a fan, I am part of that culture. You're certainly not a scientist. I'd never, are you kidding me? But that cultural aspect of space exploration being romanticized and being a big part of growing up and a big part of who I am, sort of an optimistic, forward-looking fella, that landed really hard in a good way for me when I was in that NASA exhibit in the game. And the ending where it talked about because I do believe this. I don't think I'm wise. I think a lot of people believe this at a fundamental, biological level. But, this idea of being connected and made of the same material and somehow a sense that there is much more going on than what we see. Doesn't mean there's a God or not a God. Doesn't mean there's a unity. Doesn't mean there's multiverses. But there is this kind of mystery that this game not only speaks to very well and has a satisfying explanation for it, but that mystery is, to me, has always been the force that made space and science exploration and science fiction so exciting. And so, yes, I wasn't crying, and it was, oh my God, but yes, Citizen Chad, you piece of shit, it touched my soul. It resonated. It meant something to me at an emotional gut level. I don't know how else you can say it. All right. There's some stuff I didn't like. I'll talk about on the next video or a later video. There's some stuff I did like. There's certainly things I still want to know, which I didn't understand in the narrative. But this has been a long video. I appreciate you hanging in there. And I hope you liked it. I hope you found something interesting here. And I hope you're well, most importantly. And let me know what you think in the comments or on a live stream or however you find me of Starfield. And I'll see you soon, fellas. Goodbye.